Hey guys, it's Tom Bucks. Thanks for tuning into MST.TV, and I've got a pretty awesome video for you guys today. We're going to be looking into Invoked Shaddolls, explaining why they're getting so popular, why are they so good. We got a profile for you guys. I got my variant right here. After looking at all sorts of variants out there, this is my current tuned build to kind of handle the meta and kind of adapt forward. And then we have strengths, weaknesses. Yes, the deck does have weaknesses, and we can talk about how to kind of stop them, whether you're going first, second, what are those cards that are really good to kind of stun them. And then we also have a combo demonstration. Team Samurai X1 did a really good combo, and I'm going to try to break his combo down step by step and also do a couple of test hands. So make sure you guys hit that thumbs up, hit subscribe, ding notification bell, and we'll jump right into this one. Okay, so we got a main deck and an extra deck. As for the side deck, I'm actually going to be doing a full-on ultimate counter guide. It's been really hard to choose the decks, especially with the decks constantly fluctuating above the top 8 lines. So we're going to do a full ultimate counter guide separately to cover most of the side deck cards that are available. But we are still doing the weakness segment, so stuff that you can side against this deck, we'll talk about it. Well, let's start off with some of the cards here, starting with Alistair the Invoker. This is your key normal summon of the deck. Sometimes you have to set a card and pass, and it does happen when you don't open with a fusion spell, but this, usually the first invocation that you add, if you don't have Shaddoll Fusion, that's fine, as long as you can fuse into a Shaddoll monster, as invocation can go into any type of fusion monster. It's a generic fusion card to some degree. It's just that if you go into an invoke card, then you can use the field and your graveyard and your opponent's graveyard as material. But aside from that, this is typically, you're going to use the invocation for your Shaddoll monster first, and then use Invoker of Madness when you fetch your second copy of Invocation. That's when you can go into your Mekk-Knights and stuff like that. And that's why it's very important. Next up, we have 3 Shaddoll Wendy and 1 Ariel. I agree with Team Samurai X1. Sam's Ariel combo is very powerful. Not exactly the most intuitive combo, but once you learn it, it's kind of like really strong, and I absolutely agree. And like Wendy, I know some of the builds out there do not run Wendy. They're playing more of a pure Shaddoll Invoked, and I'd say it's a missed opportunity because Wendy is just really difficult to answer, because the moment it goes to the graveyard, it fetches you a new monster. It sets a monster. Typically Ariel would be your opening combo set because you can pair it off with Construct. But aside from that, even if it's in your hand and you use an El Shaddoll Fusion during opponent's turn, you're setting your board to kind of counter your opponent. You can set down your Shaddoll Beast so that you can refix your hand. You just have lots of access to resources, and that actually makes Squamata an even better card, because Squamata can either now dump a Wendy to summon out a monster, dump a dragon to pop a card, dump a hedgehog to add a card to hand. So it actually makes Squamata an even more flexible card to play, and that's why this is really good. And as for Ariel, aside from the Revive from Banish pile and put the monster back in defense mode, that's a really cool effect, and that's part of like the construct and using the new trap. But the Banish 3 from the graveyard is very important in the current format, as the current format is very grave-centric. Most decks will use the graveyard, and banishing 3 cards out of the graveyard, and you're using an El Shaddoll Fusion to do so, can completely cripple out something. Imagine like a Shaddoll, like not a Shaddoll deck, even a Shaddoll deck actually. Shaddoll deck is just ripping apart all their Shaddoll Fusions out of the graveyard so that when you break their construct, they don't get anything. Or you go ahead and break a spiral board by getting rid of everything in their graveyard mid-combo, like getting rid of their master plan, getting rid of their quick fix. It does hurt a lot. Next up, we have our Shaddoll monster lineup. We're just going to quickly run through this. Double Beast because it gives you draw power. Double Hedgehog because it can help you add a card. And sometimes you just really want to have a card in your hand. Like when you finish a combo, perhaps you want to finish with a Hedgehog just so that you have a Shaddoll monster in your hand. Preferably a Squamata, because Squamata is really flexible. And it's like, compare it with Orcus. Orcus Nightmare lets you dump any of your Orcus monster into the graveyard. Squamata basically lets you dump any of your Shaddoll cards into the graveyard, and they proc different effects. So it's almost the same. Speaking of Squamata, 2 copies of Squamata, and I'm currently playing Double Dragon. The problem, Double Dragon. So we got Billy and Jimmy right here. Why are they important? It's because people can run Floodgate against you, and it does become a little bit of an issue. I don't like running into a Solemn Strike. I don't like running into Anti-Spell. Anti-Spell, like, you want to open with a Shaddoll Dragon and an El Shaddoll Fusion when someone anti-spells you, because then you can El Shaddoll Fusion and just pop it. That's really cool. But when you get locked out, this deck is so spell dependent to the point that, yeah, it's to a fault that becomes one of their biggest weakness. And that's why Shaddoll like dragon becomes a bit more important. When you play your Shaddoll Fusion and they have some sort of back row, it feels really safe to actually drop the dragon into the grave. And that's what I'm personally choosing to play too, because people are choosing to run these kinds of floodgates. Like, I guess in the upcoming format, you're going to see more and more spells and traps to stun you out. So that's the Shaddoll lineup for me. No Falco. I think Falco's utility got replaced by Wendy, and that's just my opinion right there. In terms of the Perform Mage package, yes, you have to run the Perform Mage package, which is Perform Mage Damage Juggler. Actually, I run 2 Damage Juggler, 1 Trick Clown, and 1 Hat Tricker. Do you need to run this Hat Tricker? I find the utility nice because sometimes you're not looking for the Trick Clown, or you already have the Trick Clown in hand. Having a Hat Tricker can help you get into the cross sheep a little bit faster, a little bit easier, and yeah, sure, it does expend your damage juggler to search it, but it is a free monster, and this also helps you go into Dweller sometimes. And next up, we have Hand Trap lineup, which is the remainder of our monsters. We have Triple Gamma and Driver. I don't think Ash is a very good card this format, and I don't think most of the Ghost Girls do enough. Gamma, on the other hand, breaks one monster very well, and it breaks Appaloosa because of the fact that Appaloosa does not destroy the card, and Gamma does not have a discard cost. You can keep on abusing Gamma until the point where Appaloosa has no more, I guess, has no more negates left. So if you have a Gamma and a Nibiru, you can just keep Gammaing them and then drop a Nibiru, because they negated your card, so you can drop a Nibiru, or you can pair the two together, and it's actually quite hilarious. But that's why Gamma is a prime choice for me right now, and I think you're going to see a lot more people play Gamma, because honestly, Effect Veiler, Spirals can like prevent anti-targeting. You just need something that can actually remove something off the board, and 1 driver, yeah. And they're also light, so they work nicely with the Shaddoll Fusion if you need to drop lights into the graveyard to throw Construct into the graveyard. And that's like the monster lineup. Let's go into spells. Okay, for our spell lineup, we run the Ham and Cheese, so that's why we're playing Set Rotation and 1 Terraforming, because we can fetch the Ham or the Cheese. And if you're wondering what's the Ham and the Cheese, this is your Ham, which is Magical Meltdown, so you can go off with your combos. So this is going Ham, and going Cheese is to completely stun your opponent out with a Mystic Mine. I absolutely agree with the Mystic Mine. It's because it's so useful in the game 1. People kind of get annoyed when you play this against them. The reason why it's so mandatory is just that all the decks these days, they build these boards that are full of monster-based negation, or they want to like wreck your board in some way or form. And I think forcing them to negate this is just as good as letting this land. If this lands successfully, you can usually pop it yourself with a dragon or activate your own copy of Magical Meltdown to turn it off. And Set Rotation also helps with this. If your opponent sets up a Mystic Mine against you, you can use Set Rotation to set up your own Mystic Mine against them. And it's all, you know, fun for one, I guess. It's not really fun for the other guy when they're stuck under a Mystic Mine, but that's why it's necessary. And Magical Meltdowns are just additional fusion spells that you can fetch out. This whole deck is just made up of fusion spells. Speaking of fusion spells, we have Shaddoll Fusion. It's just the Void Imagination for Shaddolls, I suppose. It's still very powerful, nonetheless, because Shaddoll Fusion, of course, going second, this card is extremely powerful, but even going first, just remember that Shaddoll Fusion and El Shaddoll Fusion can only be activated once per turn. And for anything that negates the activation, that just means you can activate another copy. So that's why having 2 copies in your hand doesn't really hurt, but it does hurt when your opponent ashes this card, because it considered as the effect being negated, not the activation, so therefore the activation went through. And that's the end of this one, but still really good. If you successfully resolve this card while your opponent controls a Link monster or a monster from the extra deck, you should just win the game. You have such a flexibility. This is like a double Foolish Barrel to dump basically anything in your deck, setting up your construct, setting up all your plays right from the get-go, and that should just win you the game. It's a net +2 when that goes through. Then we have El Shaddoll Fusion, more likely to be used during your opponent's turn, but during your own turn you can also use it. Once you burn off your Shaddoll Fusion and you send El Shaddoll Fusion to the graveyard, then you can get another fusion, especially when you pair off the cross sheep, which can lead to a larger combo. And for the one card that is not hard, quote-unquote hard once per turn, or just then we have Invocation. This is the one card that you can activate multiple copies of. Remember, this is a generic fusion card. Fusion summon 1 fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand as fusion material. That's the first part of it, so that you can fuse out the Shaddolls in your hand. That's why Hedgehog is such a big part of this deck, because you don't really want the monsters on the field. If they're on the field, you can't use Invocation to summon. In fact, that's actually going to be a very big chunk of the ruling that I'm going to be talking about in the upcoming ruling video, is that Invocation does not send stuff on the field if you're going to be going into a Shaddoll monster. And that's actually something I've been seeing some people do. So don't do that, alright guys, please. So that's a little bit of ruling, but I'll be emphasizing it more in the upcoming ruling video. But yeah, this card is very powerful. If we go into like the invoke stuff, then you can start banishing stuff from the graveyard, the field, and your opponent's graveyard. So yeah, invocation. Typically, the first invocation will go into a Shaddoll monster. The second one will be fetched by Alistair of Madness. That's what the other one that goes into Mekk-Knights. And finally, for the last 3 spells, Call by the Grave, because it's Call by the Grave. The format is super grave centric, so if you draw into this card, it's actually not that bad. Okay, for traps, we have Rest Shaddoll Incarnation. This card is really useful, I suppose. Like, on the field, it is still a monster reborn for your Shaddoll monsters. It can go face up or face down. Face up, perhaps, for some of your fusion dudes, and face down, perhaps some of the guys you really want to flip back face up. It's useful, but I think it's more useful in the graveyard, where it can book something face up to face down, or something face down back to face up. So it's ultimately gonna be one of those pieces that can immediately activate some of your flip effects right away. So that's why it's useful. The other trap you can use, and I'll just talk about it right now, Shaddoll Core. It's kind of like a bridging tool, where you can just dump this card with Squamata or perhaps even Construct to add the other fusion that you didn't use already and put it back in your hand so that you can use that fusion right away. So it's like a bridging tool so that you get additional utility coming from your Construct, and that's why some people are choosing to run one. It's not, I guess it's a choice depending on your playstyle. If you want to kind of close that gap during the combo, then yeah, go ahead and run the core. Core does summon it onto the field if you set it, and yeah, since it's a monster, Boros can put it in defense mode. So yeah, there's that. If you made it this far in the video, consider hitting the subscribe button and ding the notification bell. Really helps out the channel. And to kick things off, let's start off with triple Construct. Some people are playing 2. I'm choosing to play 3. Why? My experience with playing 2 Construct is that once my board gets broken, the Shaddoll Fusion starts to lose a lot of value. And the bad part about that is if someone does break your board, and in a skilled long matchup, especially a mirror match, your board is likely going to get broken. And the worst feeling is when you have a Shaddoll Fusion and when you activate it, well, you can't. You have to go into a Winda, and you can't go into a Construct. And going into Winda trips up your own play. You floodgate yourself, and you have to send Winda to the graveyard, so you have to burn a normal summon, so your plays become extremely linear, and that's why I'm playing the 3rd Construct. I'm not playing App Cologne for that simple reason. Although App Cologne is very flexible, but App Cologne, one thing I don't like about App Cologne is that it's got a once per turn clause stuck on it, and I can't really abuse it as hard as a Construct, and that's why Construct is Bay, and we're moving forward. That's why it's triple Construct, just in case, because you're burning 2 Construct with the first combo, so the 3rd one is just there, just in case your board gets broken, and you're holding onto a Shaddoll Fusion to keep playing. Alright, that's my experience with it. That's why I decided to cut the App Cologne, and I went for the Construct. Sure, the attributes kind of suck with the Wendy and the Aerial, but I think I'll have to live with it for now until the meta changes and I readapt. Right now, 2 El Shaddoll Winda, because it's the Floodgate S monster, and it's the monster you typically summon out with El Shaddoll Fusion during opponent's turn so that they get locked into only 1 special summon, and most combo decks require more than 1 special summon to even do a single thing. So yeah, starting off with the combo, it really sucks for them. As for the Invoke side, this extra deck is completely packed tight. Some people only run 1 Mecha, but I play 2 because I like having that utility. And then on top of that, 1 Ragin, and I'm not running Kaliga, if you guys are wondering. I'm running the Purgatrio. Some people don't play the Purgatrio. Raijin's really good because with the Wendy lets you play with the wind, and therefore you naturally have a wind access. Booking down a quick fix kind of just ends their turn. Booking down their master plan also kind of just ends their turn. And because of those reasons, Raijin is one of the more painful monsters for a Spiral deck to deal with. And you can also use this to kind of just book yourself down. When that happens, when you have to deal with some Shaddoll Fusion shenanigan, it's just there. But typically, if you're going to deal with Shaddoll Fusion, the reason why it's kind of awkward is if you have a Mekk-Knight and you negate the activation of the Shaddoll Fusion, the problem becomes if they have a second copy and then they can go off. And of course, this is once per turn, and this does negate the activation, but it does banish the card. So maybe you don't have to deal with so many copies. Purgatrio is just there because Almirage option gives you access to Purgatrio. Caliga is very good. You can usually block a lot of effects with the Caliga, but if it gets like popped by a Spiral Tough, then it feels kind of awkward. And why am I talking in the context of Spiral? Because Spiral is still one of the most popular decks right now. And as for extra deck, we have the Abyss Dweller. Dweller's cool because this format's so grave-centric. Just turning off, like, even against a Shaddoll deck, you use this, they get no effects. It's really painful for them. One Almirage, one Alistair the Invoker. In fact, this part is like pretty standard for every single deck that I've seen so far, which is Almirage, Alistair, Cross Sheep, because Cross Sheep gives you an additional summon. Basically, this is Norden. This is just a Norden right now. Appaloosa, because Appaloosa's Appaloosa, and one Borrelsword, because Borrelsword can kill your opponent. Cross Sheep combo can always lead to a Borrelsword Dragon, and it's pretty painful for your opponent to deal with. Alistair the Invoker is mainly there to fetch you additional invocation during the combo, and that's the rundown of the extra deck. Would I play Phoenix in here? If I had space, I would. It's just that I had to cut it. I didn't realize how much I needed to cut it, and therefore I'm hoping that the dragon can actually replace it properly when floodgates do come up. You see a lot of people play there can be only one. When they do that, well, let's hope that that Shaddoll fusion can just drop the dragon into the graveyard and just pop that problem right out the door. And to some case, you have Cyberses, and most of the Shaddoll monsters, they're not spellcasters, they're fairies. I guess Winda is a spellcaster. As for the Invoke guys, they're machines, warriors, and fiends, so you do have the option to kind of bypass there can be only one. Shouldn't be too big of an issue. That's it for the extra deck. Let's kind of give them a quick talk, and then we'll go into the combo. Alright, I'm going to break down the strengths of the deck using this little image right here. So starting off with the top row, this is your top row of monster of utility that you will always have access to, and these are the kinds of boards that you will build, use to kill your opponent, or lock them completely out. Construct is ridiculous because it's abusable to no end, and the moment they put Construct to 3, when they release a monster like Cross Sheep, you pair it off, and now you realize that you have an infinite engine of just constantly recycling out and just dumping cards into the graveyard and re-adding them. Almost like you're playing Orcus to some degree, and that's what Construct is used for. It's not just the beat stick, it is also your graveyard ditcher and refetcher right away. So sending Construct to the graveyard is never really a minus unless you have nothing to really add back. And same with Winda, although Winda is more like a Floodgate-esque monster that you summon out during your opponent's turn, locking them out of special summoning more than once per turn. And that's actually really powerful, considering any of the combo decks will need to special summon at least 3 to 4 times before their deck is actually complete with their board. And then in other words, Winda leaves your opponent with rather weak monsters or weak boards that you can easily crush, because you can get rid of your own Winda if you want to extend on your own combos. Mekk-Knights gives you a banish-based negation that is Omni-Negate to some degree, and that's really good because it does remove the card and doesn't destroy it, it banishes it. So we're not dealing with Thunder Dragons these days, so the banishing is quite valuable. Cross Sheep, in addition to the fusions, basically this is just a Norden axis, which leads to like your Borrelsword or your Appaloosa. If you're opening play or you're killing your opponent, then you have these kinds of monster axes, and you can build boards that contain multiple monsters right here. Appaloosa paired with a Mekk-Knight and a Winda. That's your opening play. To break a board, you can go Construct, Borrelsword with another Mekk-Knight. These are the combinations of kind of monsters that you can quite easily output, because the amount of special summons you have is like it's just you have an abundant amount of special summons, and that's thanks to your spell lineup. And look at this bottom row here. These are the kinds of cards that we have. So if this particular column is basically your access to invocation. You have Meltdown, 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 Set Rotation, Terraforming. These all give you Meltdown, which leads to Alistair. So that's why it's super consistent. Then for this next row here, we have Squamata, Wendy, and Shaddoll Hedgehog. These are your Shaddoll fetchers, and you have so many of them too. And one Shaddoll fusion could just dump some of this into the graveyard right away and fetch you double. And one of the key things about why this deck is so strong and why it's so hard to negate is the fact that they build really long chains using simultaneous effect, goes on chain. So you have multiple triggers going off at the exact same time. Cross Sheep paired with a Construct paired with another, like a couple cards that went to the graveyard. You can't negate Chainlink 1, 2, and 3 because Chainlink 4 could be like a Trick Clown activating in the graveyard, and then Ash Blossom is complete garbage against this deck because you can't reach those. And even with an Appaloosa on the field, Appaloosa can only really negate the thing at the top, and typically if you have a Gamma, you can turn the Appaloosa down to 0 by that turn, and your opponent really won't have much to negate. And Damage Jugglers basically count as 3 monsters because Damage Juggler sent to the graveyard, that's 1 material, and then you fetch Trick Clown, Trick Clown gets sent to the graveyard, summons itself out. When it gets sent to the graveyard, I'm assuming you're fusing with it. So basically, one damage juggler counts as 3 light materials for you to play with Construct. So it's pretty silly. Going second or first, you can open with a Shaddoll Fusion to lead to your first Construct. Construct will send L Shaddoll Fusion, and so then you can use L Shaddoll Fusion during your turn, add it back to your hand, and then reset it so that you'll have access. So your hand can get pretty large. As for final bit of utility, you have Shaddoll Beast. In case you burned out all of your effects or you're locked under some level of floodgate, you can use Shaddoll Beast to draw cards and perhaps draw into some of the outs that you really need. And I guess Shaddoll Dragon and Squamata, you can technically, if you brick really badly, you can just set them. Shaddoll Dragon can be very useful when your opponent goes into like a floodgate-esque monster, like a barrier statue, or perhaps a monster that just floodgates you from being able to special summon. Dragon and Squamata can just pop those cards or send them back into their hand so that you can kind of get a direct out. But Dragon can also pop spells and traps to get you out of floodgate situations. So that's why I think it's very important to kind of have these cards available. And that's why they're so flexible, so useful, and super consistent, building really annoying chain links so that direct activation negation is just not very much possible. Now this deck does come with several weaknesses, and I kind of sorted it into 4 categories: spell stunning, grave stunning, board breaking, and extra deck locking. Let's start with spell stunning. If you're going first and your opponent sets like Anti-Spell Fragrance or Imperial Order, you will have a pretty rough time unless you open with El Shaddoll Fusion. If you don't have El Shaddoll Fusion, consider your turn completely skipped, because Anti-Spell Fragrance will just completely lock you out. And in any case, it's not that easy to put 2 monsters on the field. If you look at your entire monster lineup, you need monsters like Hat Tricker to get a free special summon, or you need to somehow send your monsters into the graveyard, and without spells, it's very hard to do so. And this deck also doesn't really run Phoenix because there's no space. So yeah, that's a problem. Anti-Spell Fragrance. However, if you open with El Shaddoll Fusion and you have access to Squamata or a Dragon, well, through the Squamata, then you can send the Dragon and pop that anti-spell and just go off against your opponent. Hopefully you're going into a Construct, not a Winda, because Winda doesn't really send anything to the graveyard. Construct is the only card that would really benefit from you. Otherwise, your opponent will still kind of stun you out, and you have to burn your Winda. And you don't really want to burn Winda. You might end with a Winda, but if they set up a full board and an anti-spell, Winda doesn't exactly win you the game. So spell stunning hurts. Imperial Order's also not too bad against the deck because they can chain to your El Shaddoll Fusion or your Shaddoll Fusion Invocation. It hurts. It hurts when that happens because it turns off a Magical Meltdown. It turns off everything. There's not much you can really do about it. So yeah, there's that. Grave Stunning is another access for like your opponent to deal with your particular deck. Abyss Dweller, if you try to do Shaddoll Fusion and you send stuff to the graveyard, if you're under Dweller, you don't gain anything. Every single fusion material you throw into the graveyard becomes a minus for you. Same with Different Dimension Ground and Dimensional Shifter. Dimension Shifter, everything getting banished, including your Shaddoll Fusion, your Invocation, those aren't recoverable, and they're just lost forever. Same with DDG, Different Dimension Ground banishing your monsters. It hurts a lot when you can't recur your monsters and your effects are not going off. That's why I think DDG is a pretty decent side deck, especially when you go first. Now, those are more of the going first kind of answers. What about breaking your board? Ideally, some people are thinking about like Nibiru, but I'm like, you can still make Mekka and you can still use that token to make something as well. So I believe Sphere Mode's not bad. Sphere Mode, like this deck does expend a lot of resources, especially those decks that are only using 2 construct. If you get Sphere Moded, what are you going to do with your Shaddoll Fusion? There isn't really too much. You can perhaps put up Windows and just try to grind it out. You might still have a Boral Sword, but putting up monsters isn't that easy anymore. So there's that to consider. And if your board's completely broken, like Winda paired with an Appaloosa and a Mekka all gone, and Cross Sheeps in the graveyard, setting up a board again isn't as easy as 1, 2, 3. Let's just say you're going to need to expend a couple of cards just to rebuild your board. And if your Perform Mage engine is also burnt out, you're playing with just Alistair, and hopefully Alistair can get you there. Or maybe Shaddoll Fusion, but if you only run not enough constructs, Shaddoll Fusion can only go into Winda. That also continues to lock you out. Evenly Match is a really good card against the deck, although you'll just leave the board with Winda. If they follow up with an additional card, then yeah, they can completely wreck your board entirely with Evenly Match, because you can't really negate that with Mekka, considering you don't really have that many traps, and the only generic negate comes from Mekka, and Mekka, well, needs traps to negate stuff like that. Dark Ruler no more shuts off your entire field. Yeah, it's a legit board break, but you get to recover from that one. Super Poly in a mirror match also hurts a lot. You might give your opponent basically a free construct right from the get-go, or they'll use Super Poly to kill you midway through the turn. And yeah, that part really sucks. They'll just do their combo, and then they're like, Super Poly, take away your cards. And it hurts. It does get pretty painful. I think these are some of the more common things that people might use to break the field that you might establish, and perhaps even kill you. Other cards that people might use would be Artifact Scythe. Like, you are reliant in your extra deck, so Artifact Scythe will shut you out. But before they shut you out, if you have El Shaddoll Fusion, you can just chain it right away so that you can just get at least one monster out of the way. Except that Winda kind of just matches Artifact Scythe's attack. So yeah, you got to work with what you got. Hopefully Alistair the Invoker can help you boost that attack up. Another card that I also considered would be Dimensional Prison? Dimensional Barrier. Because if you look at some of these decks, like, you might think, oh, I can't really use it against all decks, but if you think about like Luna Lights, they mainly go into Xyz. You can call Xyz on them and might just end their turn. They can't really go into anything else. They're trying to go into Time Thieves, and yeah, they get completely turned off from that. Another thing that you can use with D-Barrier is you can use it against this deck called Fusion. That's it. You don't go into any big plays because Cross Sheep does nothing. You can't go into Construct, Winda, or Mekka. And even if your opponent sets up a board, they set another like D-Barrier, they can just activate D-Barrier, call Fusions, and all your monsters get turned off, much like Dark Ruler no more, and that will really suck. And you can't even use Mekka to kind of stop that because you don't have any ways to negate traps. So D-Barrier isn't too bad. The only matchup it doesn't really work against is like Spirals and any of the other control matchup, and any deck that just pure links, sure, they might not work, but against two of the more popular and strong decks, it's still worthy of a competitive side. So these are some of the weaknesses that this deck might have. Okay, it's combo time. So this is the Appaloosa Mekka Winda lock, and it requires 3 cards. And the breakdown is that you need something in this category giving you access to Alistair the Invoker. You need a Wendy or a Squamata. If you really think this is your bread and butter combo, then you might want to up the ratio of some of these cards. Preferably Squamata, because Squamata is just so flexible. It's just free cards. And Damage Juggler. Or if you don't have Damage Juggler, you're going to require a Trick Clown plus another light monster to give you access to, well, 3 bodies worth of lights. That's your option. So anyways, let's kind of break this one down. Let's put some of these cards back. We're going to go with Damage Juggler, we're going to go with Wendy, and we'll go with the Meltdown, alright? And then the other 2 cards in our hand, we'll just put a Mystic Mind and a Call by the Grave, which are more or less irrelevant to this combo, but good additional pieces in case you want to stop your opponent from ashing, or maybe just block your opponent out completely. And I don't know, let's just get started here. So starting off with the first part of the combo, we're going to activate our Magical Meltdown. Magical Meltdown is going to help us fetch our Alistair to our hand. Cool. And normal summon out the Alistair. Alistair is going to add the copy of Invocation into our hand. And with this is our current hand, and this is the spells that we're going to be activating. We're going to activate the Invocation, we're going to send the Shaddoll Wendy, and we're going to send the Damage Juggler into the graveyard. A Shaddoll monster plus a Damage Juggler leading into our first abusable construct. So there's multiple effects that are going to be activating right now, putting this Invocation into the grave. We're going to use Construct and Wendy. Preferably Construct does resolve. So Chainlink 1, Chainlink 2. So Chainlink 1, the Construct. We're going to be sending ourselves a Squamata into the graveyard because we want something to revive with Cross Sheep. Otherwise, we're going to be completely reviving something that's a little unnecessary, and we're going to be abusing this on the later turn anyway. So go for the Squamata. And for Wendy, we're going to revive Ariel. So Ariel, now we're going to summon this one face down on the field. Alright, so there is our Wendy, and Wendy summon, and there's the Squamata. Squamata's effect is now going to activate, and we're going to dump Shaddoll Incarnation into the graveyard. With that in mind, we have a Dark Spellcaster, Light Fairy. Now we're going to go ahead and link this one off, and we're going to go into our Cross Sheep. Now, you could activate Construct, but if you activate Construct, just end your turn now because you'll just have nothing else to do. So we're not going to do that, but instead, we're going to activate Shaddoll Incarnation. We're going to banish it, okay? And we're going to banish it with the construct to flip the aerial face up. And once that flips face up, we get to special summon out the construct onto the field. Summon it into an arrow. So summon it right here into this arrow. And we're going to activate Construct, because Construct's effect is whenever it is special summoned, you get to send a card to the graveyard. And Cross Sheep can also activate, because Cross Sheep, something got summoned as a fusion monster into its arrow, giving you a free revival. So in that case, we're going to go ahead and summon out the Squamata that we just dumped into the graveyard. And Construct is now going to send an El Shaddoll fusion into the graveyard. And because we haven't really activated an El Shaddoll fusion, the moment we add it back, we're going to be able to activate that card. So that's going to be really beneficial. Current hand size, we have 2 cards in hand, and this is our current board. So this effect is already burnt out, so we can go ahead and just get rid of that monster by using our Construct and Cross Sheep. And remember, Construct is not once per turn, so we are going to activate Construct's graveyard trigger and add back our El Shaddoll fusion. There, see, everything's working out, everything's coming out Tom. Now we're going to banish the Damage Juggler from the graveyard, and we're going to add ourselves the Trick Clown. So our hand size is now at 4 cards, and proceed to activate the El Shaddoll fusion, fusing away the Trick Clown, and we're going to get rid of the Aerial, since Aerial already used its effect, and this is much more beneficial. However, if we want to be flexible with the combo and you think the Dweller is a bit more necessary, then you might want to fuse away the Squamata, because this can make a bigger Dweller. So anyways, let's continue the combo. We're going to get rid of the Trick Clown, and we're going to go ahead and summon out Construct number 2. And we're just going to summon you right here. And Trick Clown is going to activate, Construct's going to activate, and Alistair's going to activate. You go ahead and mess with the Chain Link. Chain Link 1, 2, and 3. Why this one at 3? Because this one can protect these 2 chains. So special summon out our Trick Clown, and then we go ahead and discard a card. In any case, we're just going to discard a card. That's by effect. So if you have a Shaddoll monster, you can go ahead and just get their effects off as well. If you have a Shaddoll Beast, dump the Shaddoll Beast, draw another card. So it's just basically a free card. So now we're going to add ourselves an Invocation thanks to Alistair. And as for Construct, Construct will now send, I believe now we're going to send ourselves a Hedgehog into the graveyard, because Hedgehog is now going to add another monster back into our hand, making sure that our El Shaddoll fusion that we're going to add back, that's going to be live. So we're going to add Wendy. The reason why we're adding Wendy is that because Squamata is already on the field. Otherwise, add the Squamata, because Squamata is just way more flexible than the Wendy. You can send a dragon, send whatever, but for now, add Wendy, because Wendy offers you the summon. You can add Beast if you want, but you're only going to get a drop. But if you think that the back row is going to be a bit of an issue, you can go ahead and add Dragon. But Squamata kind of fits the all-purpose category, so we're going to add the Wendy. And yeah, so this is our current hand right now. So now we're going to continue on with this, and we're going to go ahead and activate our Invocation. We're going to banish the Construct, and we're going to banish our Alistair, or A-lister, whatever you want to call him. And for that, we're going to summon out Mekk-Knights. And this is going to go to the graveyard. Alistair is not once per turn, so you can dump the other card. If this card is not a spell card and you want some sort of spell negations against your opponent, then you should dump this one just so that you can add your last copy of Invocation into your hand, so that you will have a spell that you can negate later on. Otherwise, you can't really stop spell activation, and that would suck, because that's the only thing that he's really meant to do. Now, you're not going to be out of Invocation just yet. You still have Invocation in the grave, so you can go ahead and activate the Invocation in the graveyard to put it back into the deck to add back the Alistair that was banished. And so this is going to be your hand, and this is your banish pile, and I guess we get to shuffle up because it is shuffled back into the deck. And from here, you have choices that you can make. You can go ahead and just lock your opponent out if you really want to with a Dweller. Just open up a zone and just go for a Dweller, or you can go ahead and do this. So you're gonna go ahead and take 1, 2, and 3, put these in the graveyard, and you're gonna link into an Appaloosa, into an open arrow, so you have all the free zones available for you. And Construct is going to activate, and now you can add back the El Shaddoll fusion, and blah-de-da, you set this card, and you can just fuse away these 2 so that you can go into a potential Winda in the future. So this is kind of what the board looks like. So this is the material that goes into the Winda. So now you have negation, spelled monster effect, and and spell negation, triple monster effect negation, and 1 special summon lockout. So that's why this card is so powerful. So it affects them during your opponent's turn, and you can prevent your opponent from really negating your particular card as well. So this is the options that you have, making sure that everything kind of moves out smoothly. If your opponent can't build a board from whatever negates you have, then you still have Invocation and Alistair to play with, and that should be able to enough to build a board. And don't forget, when you do the Wendy Squamata, you're likely going to summon a Shaddoll Beast. That's going to help you extend your play even further. So GG to your opponent, and let's go into some free hand testing. Okay, random free test hand. I hope this is a decent hand. If we're going first, we got Damage Juggler, Hedgehog, El Shaddoll Fusion. That's not bad. Okay, I don't really want Trick Clown, but wow, double Hedgehog, so that's not the most ideal hand. No access to Alistair. How would I play this one out? I think with these materials, I can go into Construct, and I can still add back a card, and I can still go into a Hat Tricker to get a flip. So let's just try that out. We're just going to go ahead and end Shaddoll Fusion, and we're going to send these two to the grave. The reason why I'm holding on to this is I think I can actually fuse this one later on. Otherwise, you can probably just fuse it right away. For now, we're going to go ahead and just go into Construct. Construct will send a card to the graveyard, and Hedgehog is going to add a card. The card that Hedgehog is probably going to add is going to be the Aerial, and for you, what you're going to send? You're going to send a Squamata. I think I can go into Cross Sheep. I think, yeah, this could lead to a Cross Sheep. So, where's my... There it is, Squamata. So, we're going to shuffle up. Squamata's effect, we're going to send the Trap now. There it is. And... okay, we're gonna go ahead and banish Damage Juggler and add to our hand. Probably shouldn't shuffle as much. Where is Hat Trigger? Hat Trigger. And because Hat Trigger, if there's 2 or more monsters on the field, you can get special summon out for free. We're gonna go ahead and set our Aerial, and we're gonna special summon out our Hat Trigger. And with that, we can perform a quick little link summon into Cross Sheep. Cross Sheep only requires 2 different names. It's not like Alistair, which needs different type and different, just basically everything different type and different attribute. And since Construct went to the graveyard, we can add back our El Shaddoll Fusion for later use. We're not going to add back Shaddoll because Shaddoll is going to get used right now. We're going to go ahead and banish Shaddoll and the Construct to flip this card face up. And this is going to trigger, and we're going to special summon out the Construct in defense mode, and Cross Sheep activate, Construct activate, and we're going to go ahead and special summon out the Squamata onto the field. We're going to summon it right here in between everything. And this is our grave, this is our hand. Construct is also going to send a card into the graveyard. I think the most ideal send right now would probably be the Shaddoll Fusion that we can use right away. So this effect is now burned. We can technically just go into an Abyss Dweller, and that wouldn't be too bad. We can have Abyss Dweller set 1. We still have a Hedgehog, and we can send this one to the grave and set up a Winda. That's an okay option, but in any case, we're just going to go ahead and link these 2 off. We're just going to see how far we can extend now. And maybe I'll make a bad play in the end. But hey, this is all part of the learning process, everyone. So we're going to go ahead and make an Alistair, the Invoker. Okay, so we have Alistair, the Invoker of Madness. Construct's effect is going to activate. We're going to add the Shaddoll Fusion into our hand. That means we can now fuse. All these effects are burned, so you're not really going to get anything out of this, but at least we have the Shaddoll Fusion already in hand. So we're going to go ahead and activate the Shaddoll Fusion. Shaddoll Fusion, we're going to send Trick Clown. And if we really want to go into an Abyss Dweller, then we would get rid of the Squamata. But if we want flexibility on our next turn, we'll leave the Squamata. Let's just get rid of the Aerial this time. We're going to send these 2. And we have a light, and we get to go into Construct number 2. Alright. We're going to get Chain Link. We're getting a 3-part Chain Link. Chain Link 1, 2, and 3. 3 is going to be our Trick Clown, because that's the one that is probably not ashable and a little harder to negate, and we want to protect these Chain Links. So in this case, Trick Clown is going to be special summoned out onto the field. And then we're going to get ourselves... we can toss a Wendy into the graveyard, or a Beast if we want to draw a card. Wendy would give us a free monster, so I guess we'll go with the Wendy. That's the send to the grave. And part of our effect, we're going to go ahead and toss a card into the graveyard. We're going to throw the Hedgehog into the graveyard to add an Invocation. Unfortunately, we don't have Alistair, so I don't even know how valuable that particular play is. Wendy's going to activate. Wendy's going to set ourselves a Shaddoll Beast. And we're going to go ahead and set one. If we really want to open up our zones, like if you go into, I guess if we do this, we can go into Abyss Dweller, and yeah, we can actually preserve our Trick Clown for next turn. We have a Shaddoll Beast to play with. We have an El Shaddoll Fusion. So that's kind of the board I would end with. That means my opponent will not have any grave effects and potentially even be locked into a Winda. So that would be my freehand testing. It was a little harder to tell what I would do with the aerial, but in the end, aerial did actually matter in setting up this particular board. Now, instead of going into like everything, I think we also had the option for an Appaloosa. If you really wanted to take these three and go into an Appaloosa, it is completely up to you, and you can still go into Appaloosa and you still have the Construct plus the Shaddoll Beast, which means you can still go into an Appaloosa Winda play right here. So those are the options we have for this particular play. So that's the kind of rundown. You can either go these guys here into that and these guys into this. So that's a potential option that we have. And when you put this into the graveyard, you get to fetch back your Shaddoll Fusion. So if your opponent does extend past you, then you can get this back, and this will be going into the graveyard. This will be like a trade-off like this. So for going second, Shaddoll Fusion, I'm gonna assume is live. Maybe I'll throw in maybe one or two negations on their side. Let's see what happens. This is pretty good. That's not bad. That's a lot of copies. Okay, you know what? I'm just... Okay, freehand testing number 2. We have... This is going second, so here's our 6th card. We have a lot of fusions. In fact, this is the one where you probably want Shaddoll Fusion to just go off, and you can bait out your opponent. So we're going to start off with Magical Meltdown. Magical Meltdown, if it does not get negated and they're waiting for the Alistair, then you get an Alistair summon. Either way, it doesn't really change up too much, but I don't know if you want them to have an Alistair available, but if they already have one in hand, then you waste it. It sucks if you have an Ash. If you waste your negation on that, that's okay too, because I still have a Shaddoll Fusion that's what I really want to activate. So if you fail to negate this, you will lose, because it's so powerful. As long as you control a monster from the extra deck, it's just going to go off like ham. In fact, this is what we're going to demonstrate now. We're going to go ahead and summon this. This gets Ash. Okay, we don't have Invocation, so we can't really extend, but we already have both types of fusions available. So we're going to start off with the Shaddoll Fusion now that we've gotten Ash. It's a little safer, and the monster we're going to dump into the graveyard include a Damage Juggler, and we're going to go for Squamata just for flexibility. And this is now currently our graveyard, and we're going to summon out our Construct. Cool. Construct effect, Squamata effect, Chainlink 1, Chainlink 2, Squamata. We're going to dump a Wendy into the graveyard because we can get an Aerial. And this one is also going to dump the Trap, because why not? Alright, so we have the Trap, we have the Wendy. Wendy's now going to summon out the Aerial, so just look for the water. Here we go. And we're going to set this onto the field. Now we want to actually banish the Constructs, so instead what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and just straight up link these off. 2 different names, that just makes it so that we can go into Cross Sheep. Here we go. Cross Sheep is on the field. Construct is going to activate. Construct will just add back the Shaddoll Fusion. Now this is not usable, so I'm just going to put upside down right here. This is already used. And we got to banish our Damage Juggler. And we're going to add our Earth Buddy to your hand, which is the Hat Tricker. Score 3 for me, please. Now we're going to go ahead and banish the Shaddoll Fusion, or Shaddoll Incarnation, and the El Shaddoll Construct to flip this one face up. We're going to activate this effect, special summon out the Construct onto the Arrow of Cross Sheep. Cross Sheep's going to activate, Construct's going to activate, Construct is to dump another card into the graveyard. So we already use Wendy and Squamata, so we can go ahead and dump Hedgehog now. Hedgehog is going to add Shaddoll Beast into our hand. And of course, Cross Sheep is going to revive a card, so we're going to revive the Squamata. So everything here is just like a bunch of chain links that are just blocked with each other, which is fairly annoying for most people, and they're just constantly going off. Current hand looks like this. This is a pretty big hand. We have about 7 cards available. We have 2 free summons here. As long as we burn the El Shaddoll Fusion, we can still go off. Now this is in defense mode, so I can't really use that for aggression, so we are going to probably just link it off right now. I think I can probably just push another card into the graveyard first if I just burn the Shaddoll Fusion. But in any case, no, let's just go ahead and link this off. We're not going to fetch anything with that construct. That construct is basically a dud. Besides, they already activated its effect once, so we're going to link those 2 into Alistair. And if they have like a bunch of battle-based stuff, this is how you kind of cripple the battle-based interaction. So now we have an El Shaddoll Fusion. Go ahead and activate the El Shaddoll Fusion. We're going to fuse away our Trick Clown, and we'll fuse away the Shaddoll Beast. So that way we can get a draw. And this way we can go ahead and summon out another construct, this time in attack position into the arrow. Okay. We're going to activate Alistair, Construct, and the Shaddoll Beast, and the Trick Clown. So Trick Clown as the Chainlink 4, Beast, draw a card. Well, that's kind of a dud. Construct effect. Construct effect, we're going to dump. I don't even know what we can throw into the graveyard anymore. If they have some sort of back row, I guess we can dump a dragon, I guess. Pop a back row for later on. On top of that, we also have Alistair. We can throw a card into the graveyard and it will get its effect. We can just throw Driver because Driver can still be used in the graveyard. So now we can add Invocation. And I guess now we have access to Invocation. Go ahead and activate Invocation. We have an Alistair that we used earlier. We're going to banish the Alistair, and we're going to banish the Construct, I guess. Now we get Mekk-Knights. We could technically ditch another card to fetch another card back, but I am not going to go that far. And with all these extra materials, we can just make a Boral Sword. We'll just give ourselves an extra arrow here. And now we have a Boral Sword. Cool. And now we can even special summon this card out and then overlay these 2. And now we have ourselves a Dweller too. Alright, this is just free play Yu-Gi-Oh! So we have probably more than enough damage to OTK through this. So this is kind of the stuff that we are probably going to see a lot of in the future. Just freehand testing. Of course, we can still brick with this deck. If my opponent does not open with something from their extra deck, then Shaddoll Fusions probably would have been forced to use the Hedgehog to do a different kind of play. Probably a weaker one, but I still think it can go into this whole Boral Sword shenanigan. Well, that's all I got for this video, guys. If you guys enjoyed this very thorough, very in-depth look at Invoked Shaddolls, hit that thumbs up button. If you guys want to see more stuff from MST.TV, I got 2 really cool segments coming. One is Yu-Gi-Oh! Is getting really expensive, and Nishi and I are really going to bring a deep conversation about why it has come to be, and looking at all the top decks. Why didn't it kind of average down? Why did every single price round up? So we're gonna talk about that in a conversation coming up. You guys can definitely join in if you guys want to leave some comments down there. And the other thing we're gonna be doing is an ultimate counter guide, and now we're gonna include the Invoked Shaddolls as a part of the ultimate counter guide. So I was actually working on one before, but I think I'm gonna be forced to redo it because this deck is very dominant, and we're gonna see a lot of it. So make sure you guys stay tuned for that, ding the notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next one.